And welcome to your favorite podcast. This is The Five Spot. I'm your host, Donovan McNabb, joined with Armando Segura. We've had the world's biggest game this past weekend with the Kansas City Chiefs winning again, Patrick Mahomes winning again, the MVP at Disney World, and one in which I'm so happy for to see the big red guy winning again and showing his worth and proving to the world why I felt like he's the world's best coach to ever coach the NFL. Could be a little biased, but I think he's proven that he can do it with two franchises and bringing them to winning organizations and to the Super Bowl, and now showing that he can win multiple Super Bowls as well. And so when I look at this particular game, I get excited because it gave us something that we can hold on to, a nail-biting game, two teams that were well deserving of being at this particular point. Kyle Shanahan and his innovative offense and the way that Wilkes' defense played in the game. And then on the opposite side, Steve Spagnuolo was a coach with me in Philadelphia, had one of the top-rated defenses that played well in this particular game, as well as the offense adjusting at halftime. Armando, when you looked at this particular game, obviously, did you feel that the Kansas City Chiefs offensively would be a little bit more explosive than what we've seen in the first half?
I was surprised in the first half that we didn't see Travis Kelce, which kind of was a good moment for me because that meant that CBS didn't show me Taylor Swift every 5 seconds. Every time that Travis Kelce caught a football, you're going to get Taylor Swift. And so the first half was a great first half for the anti-Taylor Swift campaign, of which I am the president. And that was good. Obviously not good for the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's the reason that Travis Kelce, that moment where he puts his hands on Andy Reid, that was a little weird. I understood his frustration, but maybe he let the emotions get a little bit more of him than he should. Look, let's just say it, Donovan, the team with the better quarterback, the better head coach, and the better defense won the Super Bowl, which makes me feel like it's 1973. I mean, it's as simple as that. It wasn't about fireworks. It wasn't about, all this great, scheming and all that. It was just pure and simple who blocked and tackled better and who had the better coach and who had the better plan, who knew the rules on overtime, and who had, the game's MVP, which is once again your guy, Patrick Mahomes. We're heading down the Tom Brady. He's in the gun sights. Tom Brady is in the gun sights.
You know what? Let's go back to your comment there about the best coach. This was an opportunity for Kyle Shanahan to implant his name in the book, so to speak, of not only being able to get you there, but also to get you over the hump. And I've been in the situation, obviously, of being the 5 NFC championships and making one Super Bowl. And that was something that they held over Andy's head of he'll get you, have a great season, play well in the playoffs, but can't just seem to get over the hump of winning the Super Bowl. And Andy had to battle that from Philly going into Kansas City, where he was very successful early on with Alex Smith being the quarterback. The young Patrick Mahomes was drafted, was able to win during the regular season, play well in the playoffs, wasn't able to get to that AFC championship. But as Patrick now started to evolve, that was the big thing because his first year as a starter went to the AFC championship and lost to Tom Brady on a questionable call of offsides on their defensive end. And then the next year, getting back to the AFC championship and making it to the Super Bowl. And so when you look at Andy's resume, people will say, oh man, he's got a great winning percentage, went to the NFC championship, now going to the AFC championship, and now finally make it. Can he win the big game? And so when you look at those dark clouds over those two coaches, this was something for Kyle Shanahan that they go back to the Atlanta game when he was in Atlanta and played against New England and being up by double digits and ended up losing that game in overtime as well. So I think the storylines in this game somewhat was unfair, but it gave viewers and everybody else something to talk about. And the way that San Francisco came out in the first half in their first drive, you thought, "Wow, this is something unexpected." San Francisco is just moving the ball downfield, running the football with McCaffrey, and so when the fumble happened, it was to me, it was sort of what we talked about on the show. This game could go sideways of a team that makes mistakes and turns the football over. And San Francisco made multiple mistakes in that game, and luckily, Kansas City wasn't able to capitalize on it. But the fumbles, the muff punt return, the missed touchdown pass when he had Chris Jones in his face and he had Deebo Samuels running through the end zone open, things like that could hurt you in this game. But fortunately for San Francisco, it didn't hurt them at that particular time. But it's just one that I look back on is so I feel so bad for both coaches because this is something that Andy had to hang with. Now Kyle's going to have to hang with that over the shoulders.
Yeah, Kyle has it worse than Andy ever did because Andy was you can't win the big one, right?
The big one, yeah.
Kyle Shanahan is you choke in the big one. And the reason that I say that is he was the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons when they had a 28-3 lead against the New England Patriots and they lost the game.
Right.
He's the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers when they played the Kansas City Chiefs here in the Miami Super Bowl in 2020. And in the fourth quarter, he had the lead and they lost the game. And obviously he was the head coach of the 49ers still 2 days ago, whatever it was, where he has the lead in the fourth quarter. He has the lead in overtime.
Right.
Lost the game. So yeah. It's one of those where you didn't win the game. No. It's you choked in the game. Your team somehow lost the lead. And that's a lot more of a harsh narrative that exists than you can't win the big one. It's you choke in the big one. And that's rough, man, because I saw a lot of reasons why the 49ers lost. They missed that extra point. If they make that extra point, they probably win the game. You mentioned it, the play in overtime, 3rd and 4, and they have a backup right guard in the game, and they have, obviously their starting right tackle, Burford, and so one of them goes this way, one of them blocks that way, and right up the middle comes Chris Jones, right in between them. And you mentioned Ayuk was open. Jennings was open too. And he just missed. Purdy just had to get rid of the ball and threw it away. And then they had to settle for the field goal. And that was the end of that.
Well, it's just, when I look at it from a Kansas City standpoint, Travis Kelce was not involved in the game. And obviously him being the number one receiver pretty much on that football team, you got to try to find ways to get him the ball. Not saying that that Patrick was not looking at Travis, but I'll say this. I think things changed in that game. And it's so unfortunate, and I don't think I've ever seen this before. But when Greenlaw went out on that injury of just on the sideline, getting fired up, and then he ran out on the field, and it seems like he may have tore his Achilles, of just running out on the field. When he went out, because he's been their outside linebacker that can cover slot receivers, or he can cover, tight ends that are like Travis, more hybrid guys. When he went out, they went after number 48 in that game, and that's when Travis Kelce started to get a little bit more involved. And yes, the body bump and the anger from what I've seen of Travis Kelce going in and talking to Andy at that time, was a little excessive, and it definitely was. It was needed. It was not needed, and I'm sure they've hashed it out and talked about it. But I think Travis wanted to be more involved. Got into it with Andy a little bit, and things changed a little bit. And it wasn't so much of that argument, but it was the injury to me with Greenlaw, because now you have to put your middle linebacker in Warner covering Travis Kelce throughout the game, and that's not, you're taking him out of the run game. And so now it worked out in the favor of getting Travis a little bit more involved. And big shout out to Rashid Rice of elevating his game and becoming that focal point, because for one point, at least 65% of the season, there was no receivers. I mean, I didn't even Sky Moore. Did he even dress for the game? I didn't see him out there. We obviously know Ladarius Toney was a healthy scratch. And so you look at Nicole Hardman that came back to Kansas City midseason, was with the Jets in the beginning of the season. He almost lost in the Buffalo game on the reverse play where he fumbled. And he had multiple mistakes leading up until this point. And so now he becomes the hero of a guy that they kind of shipped off to the Jets and then brought him back to help them out. So that's big shouts out to the receivers of just continuing to fight through it. And then Patrick Mahomes, much love to him, because I've been there where you're looking for help and it's not there. And then all of a sudden you keep staying confident with your guys and they end up making the big plays for you.
So you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and of course, if we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, every single conversation finishes and starts with Patrick Mahomes. Third Super Bowl MVP, 74% completion in the game.
Okay? Yeah.
333 yards. And I was watching Twitter, and the guys on Twitter are like, he's dinking and dunking. He's not doing anything. Wrong.
He's doing exactly what the defense was giving him.
Absolutely. And ultimately, when the game was on the line, he drove his team in the final 156 or 154 to a tying field goal. Yes. And the next time they had it, he drove his team to a Super Bowl winning touchdown.
Correct.
That's what great quarterbacks do. That is what not just great, but all-timers do. And that is the reason now that Patrick Mahomes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes after that game was over and they were in the locker room and they celebrated and they come out and talk to the media, he's talking about a three-peat. He said, we're going to celebrate this one tonight. We're going to go to the parade. We're going to get our rings. And then I'm going to start thinking about the three-peat and preparing for that. And I'm thinking, whoa, my man is already, way ahead of all the rest of us, which is what he typically is with defenses. A three-peat. Is that wise that he's already talking about that? Is that wise that he's already facing Tom Brady and he lets everybody know it?
Well, I think it's a motivational piece. It's a conversation you have with guys that have been there, and those guys, those kind of figureheads, are more like Travis, Andy, Chris Jones. That's kind of a feeling that you have, but I'm going to guarantee you this, and I've never been on that other side. I've been on the side of where San Francisco is, and believe me, I'm just going to say it sucks. But for those who have won, and talking to guys like Tom and Richard Seymour and those guys, that's the mindset. Like we've done this before, but it's time to get that next one. And that next one puts us in a special category that not a lot of teams have ever reached. And so I think for Patrick, his legacy and his resume will go, unblemished, to the point where you're talking, MVPs in regular season, MVPs in Super Bowls, and to go three-peat, that surpasses a whole lot of quarterbacks, like the Peyton Mannings. That surpasses the Eli Mannings. That surpasses the John Elways. That puts him in a different stratosphere where what he's shooting for at this point, like we talked about in our shows all last week during the week, and even before we end up going to Vegas, Armando, this puts him now chasing only one person. That puts him chasing Tom Brady. And not only that, for his sake, but for Andy, that only has him chasing one person, and that is Bill Belichick. And it's an honor for me to have played under a guy like Andy, and what he taught us, and the way he prepared us, and the communication and friendship that we still have. I mean, to sit back as a former player of a guy like Andy and to see the way his players are reacting, it reminds you of when you played, but you're so excited for the guy because you know when he decides to, and I can't really say it for him because I don't know if he still can touch him, but when he decides to hang his shoes up and throw him over the wire and say, I'm done, hopefully he's either surpassed or chomping at the bit of Bill Belichick.
Yeah, as far as Mahomes, you mentioned Peyton Manning. Mahomes got Peyton Manning in his rearview mirror.
Yeah, yeah.
He won 2, right? He won
with
2.
Troy Aikman. Like he's up there, I think, with Troy with 3, right? He's up there with Troy.
Yes.
And Troy, I guess, made a comment on Twitter. Let me know when he's yeah, when he made that comment a couple years ago, and it's like
yeah.
I don't remember when I did that. Yeah.
Eating a little crow now.
Yeah.
Obviously, he did make it a few years ago, but now Patrick Mahomes has equaled Troy Aikman, also gone back to back, and now chasing his three-peat, and now chasing in the company of one guy.
Yeah.
And I would say to you that it's hard to believe that it can't be done. As far as he's 28 years old. He won the Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill. They replaced Tyreek Hill with Juju Smith-Schuster and a couple of other guys. He won the Super Bowl with them. They left. They lost both their left tackle and right tackle. They replaced those guys. They won the Super Bowl with them. Kadarius Toney, they traded for him. They won a Super Bowl with him. Then he lost his mind. They won a Super Bowl without him. Sky Moore, he dressed, didn't play, whatever. We don't need you, Mr. Sky. We're going to win with whoever we have.
Correct.
And as long as we have who, or is it who?
1-5 is one if we have 1-5 behind center.
It's like, it's very frustrating if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, Buffalo Bills, Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens, all those teams that are chasing the Kansas City Chiefs and seem to, at some point this season, have better teams than the Kansas City Chiefs. And they look up on February, the day after Super Bowl, and go, they're better than us. They're the champions again. What happened? Now what do we do? And
right.
It's hard for them to figure out what to do, because the Chiefs didn't have the more talented roster on Sunday.
Right.
Didn't have the more talented roster throughout the season, and they win the freaking championship.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's dive into just a little bit, because I remember back when I played, and I'm humble enough to talk about it, where was unaware of the overtime rule. And when I played during the regular season, obviously, in overtime you get one shot for one quarter to score, or you get a tie. And at that particular time, I was unaware, because I've just never really seen too many ties during the regular season. So that was one in which for years everyone keeps bringing up when people say, "Well, I'm not aware of the rules in the regular season." And then now you have the playoffs. And for those who were unaware of the rules in overtime, I thought when San Francisco took the ball, they understood that you get the ball, you score a touchdown, and there you go, you have it. but they end up kicking a field goal and now giving the ball back to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs go down and drive and score a touchdown, and game's over. This is now one in which they have talked about it after the Buffalo game. Remember when the whole public cry after the Buffalo game of they never gave Josh Allen a chance, to go down and go and to lead his team to a score. So now let's have our competition meeting. Let's talk about it. Let's change it. The other team should have an opportunity, to go and drive and score. Well, when you lose the Super Bowl, and then now that's your comment from your fullback, that's your comment from your defensive tackle and other players. How bad does this look now for Kyle Shanahan and the organization, especially when the Kansas City Chiefs talked about it? They say they talked about it all year and leading up to this particular game and practiced it, in practice this week.
Yeah, and by the way, the rules in the postseason is different because we can't be having a tie in the Super Bowl or
Correct.
in a playoff game. You have to. Somebody's got to win.
Somebody's got to score a touchdown.
Exactly.
Well, if the other team goes down and kicks a field goal, then you score a touchdown or kick the field goal to continue on.
Right. The only way that a team can win on the first possession of overtime, ironically enough, is if you're on defense and you get a safety. And then you have won on defense. But obviously you would have had to kick off to the other team. The other team gives up a safety, game's over right then and there. That's the only way in overtime in the postseason that the game is over after one possession. Obviously, the 49ers got a possession. They got the ball first, and then the Chiefs did, and they got the ball second. And the thinking is by the nerd faction who thinks of these things is you don't give Patrick Mahomes the last at bat.
Right.
You make him go first, and you make them make the decisions on what to do, and now you know what you're playing for.
Right.
I get that. Honestly, I don't know. Look, I believe that football is decided by football.
Right.
Football,
right.
If your defense stops Patrick Mahomes, we're not talking about this.
Game over.
Right?
Game over.
Discuss if your offense scores a touchdown. Now, Andy Reid, even though they scored a touchdown, they've got to go through the rigmarole of, are we going to kick the extra point or are we going to go for two? And Chris Jones said that they were already decided that they were going to go for two, which would have been an amazing moment. But football, it's not, I don't think Kyle Shanahan lost the game because they won the coin toss and took the ball. I don't think that's the reason that game.
I agree. And to add to that, I thought it was a great strategy in his favor, to be honest with you, because you want to go out there right now and establish it. And the way that they moved the ball, I thought they were going to score. So now if you score that touchdown, now your defense has been doing a fairly decent job all game where they held them to a 4th and 2. It was like a 4th and 2. They end up running like a sprint right arrow concept, getting the guy in the flat, a corner, which left them playing man and left the running lane wide open, which Bosa apologized to his team because that was on his side where he allowed Patrick to get outside of him and get that first down. So I mean, listen, it was a great game. It's unfortunate that one team has to lose. And Kyle Shanahan's gonna go through that through the offseason. And I've been through it. Andy went through it. And it's unfortunate for them because of that, because everyone was so waiting for the Brock Purdy story. It became one in which it was almost we tend to forget that Kurt Warner was not Mr. Irrelevant. Kurt Warner wasn't even drafted. And Kurt Warner won 2 Super Bowls and lost a Super Bowl. And so it says a lot about Kurt, but then it's like, now we've got Brock Purdy. Oh, he's Mr. Irrelevant, the last person drafted. No one expected him to be there. They moved up to get Trey Lance. They end up trading Trey Lance, and then Kyle saying with all the guys in the building that he's the best quarterback in the building, and it became a love story for Brock Purdy. Where does Brock Purdy go now from this particular point?
I believe that Donovan, I believe he moves on. And look, if we're going to put the spotlight on Brock Purdy at that Super Bowl, let me just share with you the facts are that Brock Purdy took Patrick Mahomes to overtime.
Correct. His numbers in the second half weren't that great.
Fair. Took him to overtime.
Correct.
He is Patrick Mahomes. We're talking about chasing Tom Brady and the MVP 3 times, and he got taken to overtime by Mr. Irrelevant. And not just that, Brock Purdy gave the San Francisco 49ers 2 leads in the fourth quarter and a lead in overtime. He drove them down the field twice in the fourth quarter to take the lead in the Super Bowl, including with only 1:56 left to play. And then he drove them down the field again and got them the lead in overtime. So I have a hard time thinking Brock Purdy didn't show up. I have a hard time thinking he didn't perform. Could he have played better here and there? Yeah, he missed some throws. The 3rd and 4 that we talked about where, zero blitz and Chris.
Yeah, no one blocks the all-pro defensive tackle. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the same thing as it was a misassignment, or it was a miss locating who the Mike linebacker was. When they showed up on the right side and brought McDuffie off the left, where that was another 3rd down situation where he had a slant route right behind, I think, with Jennings, and McDuffie jumps and knocks it down. That was another opportunity with that. But that happens in the game. I definitely know that. I will say overall, I thought Brock Purdy played fairly well. I think he was well above average. He protected the football, didn't turn the football over, which, as a quarterback, you have to protect the football and give your team a chance. I thought he was effective in the red area where, he was completing balls, but, some ended up being a touchdown like it was to Jennings. And then he missed a few, but that was due to really nobody being open or somebody in his face. I thought they ran the football fairly decent, with McCaffrey. If take away McCaffrey's fumble, I think McCaffrey has an outstanding game. And so I just think in that particular game for Brock Purdy, my question really is, where does he go from here? Now, is it continue to elevate, or will he become Jimmy Garoppolo? And so that's the question for me of where does he go? Because we got to remember, his contract situation is going to come up after next year. And so do they discuss that going into the season a little bit this year, this offseason, to try to, I would say, lowball him a little bit? Because if you wait another year and he plays the way he did this year and he wins the MVP, now you got to, last week's price changes this week. So where do you see him? Is it more Jimmy Garoppolo, or is this going to be one that we'll be talking about possibly you're going to have to pay your quarterback?
Yeah, I'm not seeing. There's a reason Brock Purdy beat out Jimmy Garoppolo, and I believe there's a reason why Jimmy Garoppolo was on the bench for the Las Vegas Raiders at the end of the year. Jimmy Garoppolo, his days as a taste of the day, the soup of the day, I think are kind of done. I think he is a backup quarterback, and the NFL has realized that by now. Whereas Brock Purdy, 31 touchdown passes during the season. We talked about it last week, right? That's hard to do.
Right.
And plus, they're I don't think they're going to do anything contract wise. The 49ers are like some $11.5 million over the effective cap.
Yeah.
To start the offseason. So they've got to do some work to lower, not heighten. And he's not making anything. So thank you, Brock Purdy, for not making anything. You will continue to do what? Not make anything. Thank you. I heard somewhere where he didn't have enough money to continue to rent a place in the Bay Area
Correct.
that people were taking up like a GoFundMe thing or something like that because taxes in California are so high.
They are high.
There you go.
They are high.
And you live, elections have consequences. And then they live in, a super high rent place, and he was making $895,000, which was the minimum, or something like that. So you lose 30% of that. You got to pay for your nutrition. You got to pay for, whatever body person you've got, your trainer, rent is, $7,000-8,000 a month for an apartment. And
right.
You're in the red if you're Brock Purdy. But I'm sorry, Brock, that's life. You're not in Iowa anymore, brother. You got to pay what you got to pay. And I don't believe they give him a new contract.
So let me ask you this, because I'm looking here at Jimmy Garoppolo's stats in San Francisco. His first year in San Fran, he had a 96 QB rating. Uh-huh. He had a 90 QB rating in 2018, 102 in 2019, 92 in 2020, 21, he had 99, 22 his last year in San Fran, which was kind of limited role a little bit. He had 103 QB rating. And they went to the Super Bowl in what was that 2020?
It was February of 2020. They were in the Super Bowl.
And he had a 92, almost a 93 QB rating. He battled some injury because was it 2020 or 20? It was that 2019 season. That's when he had 102 QB rating and threw for almost 4,000 yards. So in that offense, he put up some decent numbers. One in which in 2019, 27 touchdowns and 13 picks. And so, I just want to see where it goes from here, because we got guys like Daniel Jones, who makes $40 million. We have guys who haven't been nowhere near, I would say, as successful at this particular point as Brock Purdy. I just want to see if he has another year or somewhat similar, 75% of what he did this year. He's going to be demanding, or I should say, I don't know so much demanding because I don't know his agency or whatever, but he's going to be asking at least for, like we talked about with Tua, he's going to be asking somewhere between $38 and $44 million in, however they want to slice it. Do you think he's worthy of that?
Yeah. It's the going rate, right?
That's what I'm asking.
And by the way, you mentioned the Garoppolo thing. The Garoppolo fell out of favor because if you watched him play, first of all, he's always injured.
True.
His durability was terrible. And he got hurt all the time. And what happened when he got hurt? The 49ers lost. And so you can't count on a guy if he's not there. And secondly, you watch him play and guys running wide open. The ball's 3 yards over their heads. Or, look, he threw a 55-foot curveball to them. And so it was those moments where you go, okay, he ain't it.
But, even with that said, Jimmy wasn't. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, we look at Jimmy as just, we've made him out to be trash. But he completed six, let me see, it was 67% 2017, Now, 2018, he was hurt. He completed 60. He only played 3 games. In the 16-game season in 2019, he completed 70% of his passes. And then the next year, 67. Next year, 68. And the last year in San Fran, he was 67. So he was accurate. It wasn't that he was inaccurate. He was accurate. He was a winner. No, he didn't play well in the playoffs when they won the Super Bowl. I think he might have completed maybe 9, 10 passes like Tim Tebow, and they ran the football to protect him. But in that Super Bowl game, he played fairly well enough when they had the double-digit lead on San Fran. So I know we all look at Jimmy Garoppolo now and it's like, oh, well, Jimmy wasn't good. Jimmy was decent. He was well beyond average in that offense. I just want to see, I'm just going devil's advocate here because if Brock Purdy all of a sudden he battles injury or he struggles a bit now that they've lost, do we now put him in the Jimmy Garoppolo category? Because I did right now until I need to see more longevity-wise. Or does this climb more to become more like a Kurt Warner story?
Wow, the Kurt Warner story would be a high, that's a high. Because
Well, I put him there because he's not drafted and then Mr. Irrelevant.
Right.
I put him just in that category.
Okay. I'm not ready to put him there yet because
Right.
Now, again, we don't know what's going to happen. I know that he's going to have talent. Purdy is going to have talent around him.
Correct.
I don't think he falls off the table. I think if he delivers the same kind of season next year that he delivered this year, we're good. They're good.
I mean, he's getting the bag.
And he's getting the bag. You're absolutely right.
Yes, he's getting the bag.
It's the cha-ching.
Absolutely.
How good.
Yeah, you ain't living in somebody's house now. You got your own house.
That's absolutely
you and your girlfriend.
Correct.
Come on in.
Now, Jimmy's gonna.
Well, Jimmy's Jimmy
right
now.
Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy's Jimmy right now. Jimmy, he was a second round pick for New England. Came in as a backup role, played well when Tom was out. Came over to San Francisco, played well in the first year, got paid. And then his career was what it was in San Fran, but he was there for 5 or 6 years or so. And so then he's in not Oakland, but Vegas. And, it is what it is at this particular point. I'm just trying to find the trajectory of our conversation possibly next season of how that goes. So, it's interesting.
Absolutely. I think Jimmy, by the way, joins the group of quarterbacks that are going to be looking for a job in this offseason with Trubisky and guys like that. Because, there are teams that have to go in a different direction to get where they want to go. We're talking about the Raiders. The Raiders are not, they had Jimmy this year and they decided Aiden O'Connell's, we're going to experiment with him and see what we got. Yeah. We'd rather do that. And it's going to be an interesting offseason, my friend. It's
correct. Let's dive into it. Okay. You mentioned Mitchell Trubisky, who was just released, I think, by the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see what happens in Denver with Russell Wilson if they decide to trade him or cut him. He's talking that he wants to stay in Denver, which I think that's more of a political move, but I'm trying to get out of here.
I don't like that. I don't like that, Donovan.
I know because he's rewarded with big checks, big money coming up next year. And I understand that. And if he gets traded, the contract stays what it is. If he gets cut, obviously, it's a whole different ballgame. There's a strategic move in him saying that right now. I know everybody wants to say he want him to say, I want out of here. Get me out of here. And then they end up cutting him. He goes somewhere else. So we'll see kind of how that transpires. And then you talk about Jimmy. I think Jimmy's going to be released at some point, and then he'll get a chance to find somewhere to go. Going back to Pittsburgh, it'll be interesting to see what they do as far as the Kenny Pickett era, because I think they're going to go with Kenny Pickett, but they're going to bring in an established veteran, which, I mean, you can look at guys like Jameis Winston, what they decide to do with him in New Orleans. We talk Russell Wilson. It'll be interesting to see what Cleveland does next year. Will they keep Joe Flacco there as their guy, and then Deshaun Watson comes back? So there are a lot of quarterbacks right now and moves that may be made. What are ones that you'll be watching going in this offseason?
It starts at the top, and at the top of the draft, we got Caleb Williams sitting there, number 1 overall, likely, or Drake May, whoever your choice of the day is.
Right.
If you're the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields is on the team. You cannot have Justin Fields on the team with Caleb Williams or Drake May on the team.
Right.
That's not a thing. And so they're going to have to trade Justin Fields and get very little for him and like it. Because I don't believe that Bears fans will tell you, oh, we could get a 2nd-round pick for Justin Fields. No, you can't.
Right.
No, you can't. Nobody's going to give up a 2nd-round pick for Justin Fields. He's still something of a project, still someone that you have to tailor your offense around, and that requires a lot of commitment to a guy that I don't know that his team that knows him best is uncommitting from.
Right.
And so I mean, you're Justin Fields. Where do you want to go?
Well, I mean, I think just from a standpoint of just knowing a little bit about Justin and knowing people around him who have worked with him, he wants to stay in Chicago, number 1. With another option kind of be creeping up, remember, he's from Atlanta, and there's been talks about the Atlanta Falcons, of him going back home. And so it depends on what they decide to do going forward with Raheem Morris there now. Bijan Robinson's there. What do they decide to do with Kyle Pitts? Because Kyle Pitts is one of the better athletic tight ends who, both of those guys I just mentioned, were not really even featured highly in the offenses that was last year. And then Ritter, your quarterback. You've got Drake London there, wide receiver, very good. Offensive line is pretty decent with Matthews there. The defense can add a few more pieces, but they're not that bad. So Atlanta could be a spot. And so really I look into that as well. And then you also look in the draft, just to add one more before we shut it down. The Washington Commanders, new management, a new board of former NBA execs and all of this. Now you hire, Bradley to come over to be your head coach. He brings over offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury and decides to move on from Eric Bieniemy. Do they take a guy like Drake May, or do they move up to the number 1 pick to try to take Caleb Williams with what they have with McLaurin and those guys on offense?
So I got to be honest with you. When you were talking about Justin Fields and Chicago, wanted to stay in Chicago and maybe going to Atlanta, which is his hometown, I'm thinking deep dish pizza and fried chicken.
Giordano's.
I'm thinking one of those, or Hattie B's in Atlanta.
Gladys Knights.
That's all I'm thinking about. I wasn't thinking about Bijan Robinson or any of that. I was thinking fried chicken.
Oh, gosh.
And so I got to be honest with you there.
Only you.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. Sorry. Fried chicken. And so there's that. Now, and I bonked out on everything else you said.
Well, oh God, we talked about the Commanders, but
the Commanders, yes. Yes, the Commanders.
Way up ending the show.
What they got the number? What is it? 3? Is it the 3 overall pick they got? Is it or no? It's the number 2 overall pick, isn't it? The number 2 overall. But they're gonna get the leftover of Drake May or Caleb Williams and maybe Justin Daniels.
Well, yeah, I don't think Jalen Daniels will go that high.
Jalen Daniels, sorry.
I think if they're so into it, they'll move all the way up to number 1, and that would actually work in the favor for Chicago if they're looking at Drake May, if they're looking to get more picks, or if they're thinking about keeping Justin Fields, where they'll get more picks, at least another one in that first round. And possibly another second and third round pick. That would work well for them to build around what you have right now. And so I just think with the Commanders, they're the team that I'm looking at of what they decide to do. Not so much New England, who I think has that 3rd pick. And so I think that's what I'll be watching for the offseason. But we'll talk about that. This is our last show. We want to thank you for joining us here at the 5 Spot. Armando and I have had so much fun this season. Look forward to possibly next season to adding more firepower to the 5 Spot. You can recap all of our shows on Spotify and also on YouTube to watch all of our jokes, all of comments made by Armando talking about food. So if you're looking for any restaurant in Miami, or Atlanta, as he mentioned, or Chicago, Armando will tell you what type of food to look for. But more importantly, we appreciate the love and support that you've given us all throughout the year watching the 5 Spot. Join us again next season here at the 5 Spot.